Good morning. Welcome to Roleplay Cafe. I wanted to do a little couple things actually, right? I want to do a little bit of GM talk, reflections on the first Dark Age of session, campaign launch that we did on Saturday night, and a little bit of VR to Confessions of the Frustrated Game Master Robert over there about his observations about style and potential style conflicts. So. And the reason that's a perfect segue to this Reflections video is our game is written with direct, and I write in the introduction, as I've clarified, this is about style. So Dark Age of Man is about trying a different style of role-playing versus mechanisms, right? And so our game is definitely has a different style intent than traditional, or certainly than, say, Robert's game. And I'm a firm believer that the game designer, the developer, the author, the systems should inform us how we're going to play, what the style is. And as opposed to screaming at everybody at the table, we're playing D&D, but you need to be a better role player, when the mechanisms may or may not support role playing, right? Or demanding that they play tactically when there's zero tactical rules, right? So style, I think, first and foremost, should come from the author, from the book, from the rule book, from the mechanisms, right? I hope, right? And then hopefully people can pick the systems and the games with a style that supports how they like to play or what they want to do or how they like. And I personally like to try all kinds of different things. So I don't have this, I prefer in-character play, but I can do that whether it's 2D20 Star Trek Adventures, or I can do that whether it's Traveler, I can do that whether it's D&D, I can do that in our game. I don't care, but the mechanisms, I have to understand the system and how the mechanisms inform me as a player and also inform the GM, so I know what the GM's about, right? Okay. So that's why this was a perfect conversation, because our game literally is about trying a different style as a player and a GM, right? I'm actually saying, try this different experience, right, in the introduction. Okay. As we are really trying to empower the players through player agency, we're trying to give the players as much freedom to create around them in a way, right? And the GM has to basically respond to that and create roles and conflicts, right? Okay. And of course, it's not easy because most of us have played a certain way most of our lives, right? And okay. So the other night, and I've been waiting months to GM again, certainly online, and I've been waiting months to GM my game, Dark Age of Man. And so we set up later on a Saturday night to try to get as many opportunities for people who could make later Saturday nights involved. So that was good. We ended up with 3 fantastic people and players. We've got more guys, I think, that waiting until their schedules work to get in and out. And it is going to be one of those campaigns where there's going to be characters who come in and out of Dredgewater, right? Okay. Great characters. In a blacksmith, Ulfgar, we have a apprentice. I believe he had a prestige of 0, so therefore he was technically a peasant blacksmith of the town of Dredgewater. Then we had, of course, a lord, Brian. Brian made an actual small landholding gentry lord, which was fantastic. A young man who had basically has just inherited his father's estates, right? Like the 19-year-old man, which is fantastic. And Dell makes a kind of a anti-social warden, a game warden, so to speak, and puts himself in a little cabin out on the north edge of the lands of the Baron, on which he has been charged with keeping banditry down up there, etc., etc. So he kind of defines, I let them define their character space based on their attributes, right, their prestige. Fantastic. I told them before launch, we talked a little bit, the game is not complicated, so there weren't a whole lot of questions. Of course, these guys have already played with me, and of course, Brian's already run a game of Dark Age of Man that was fantastic, that was brilliant. Of course, Dell and I have played many in this, and we've been GMs of Dark Age of Man. And then, of course, Eric's played with me before, but not in Dark Age of Man. He has played, actually, he might have played in Kevin. Did he play in Kevin's game? I can't remember. When Kevin ran Dark Age of Man, I can't remember if that was Eric. Pardon me. A lot going on in the last few weeks. Okay. And I told them, I'm not going to launch the session. I'm going to let one of you set the tone of the session. I'm going to let one of the characters define the time and the space and set the tone. I had already told them it was winter. There was a write-up, kind of a session 0 conversation and video on our Facebook group, and of course I posted kind of what's happening in Dredgewater right now. So they knew that it was winter. They knew the crops, certain crops were going to be coming in, and they knew there was a bandit wanted. Except they knew some basic stuff just to make it seem like the world, had something happening they could touch on as a context. For those of you who don't know, we have a world, Dredgewater, of this pseudo-historical England and Ireland. I have defined Dredgewater and its main inhabitants. I have defined certain kingdoms and etc., right? So we have context. We understand the location, the world, the culture, etc. Then that's it. And then we have a random seed generator of a large chart, which is these things that occur in the world that can come up, and I can fold them into play organically as they move through the world, doing it at whatever it is they're pursuing or trying to do and trying to achieve. And the players decide what's relevant to them. They decide what they have to deal with, what they want to deal with. They are utterly motivated to pursue their own interests, right? Okay, I'm trying to motivate them to do that, right? By letting them create the environment, so to speak. Okay. Within context. Okay, we still have to have a grounding. We still have to have a context. Okay, then we have I added a new piece to this that has not been yet put in the rules. This was a test. Individual seed generators for their characters, the nobleman, the peasant outlaw, the professional, and the man or woman of God, right? These aren't gender biased, but I mean, I didn't want to write a man of God, so I put person of God in the charts, right? And these were meant to be generic for the kind of standard characters they might create. Eventually, I will make random seeds for their character. Lord Elmir will have his own 6 random events that can come up that involve his household, that involve his responsibilities, etc., etc. Okay. Now, how he deals with it, when he deals with it, how he goes about solving these problems, that's player agency, right? I want them to solve the problems, not figure out the riddle of what it is I'm hiding from them, right? I mean, my biggest issue, my 2 biggest problems with gaming, and I've said this before, this has been the biggest problems, I think, in gaming in history. Assumption risk. I want to remove assumption risk by the players, and I want to end metagaming by the players in our sessions. What I mean by that is if I minimize or remove assumption risk by allowing the players to be right or wrong in their decision, and not pre-deciding whether that's the right decision or the wrong decision, we don't have so much assumption risk issues here, right? We don't. Assumption risk occurs. Many of you may or may not even know what that is. Sorry if you don't. But assumption risk ultimately is a lack of details or communication in which players make assumptions, and then that leads to a very bad end, right? It leads to miscommunication. It leads to misunderstandings. It leads to something that could be detrimental to the party and to the character, and certainly could be detrimental to the group if there is a big communication misunderstanding. So I want to minimize or remove assumption risk by allowing the players, whatever they say to some degree, is as valid in truth as anything I would be hoarding behind my screen, right? Okay. In other words, it's true until the circumstances change, and the circumstances change because of dice conflicts, because of dice checks, right? We play to find out. But it's okay for them to have an idea that I don't declare it immediately. He's barking up the wrong tree. What a fool, because it's going to create problems, right? Okay. That doesn't guarantee they're in charge, right? So it's very difficult to explain, but that's the goal, right? The second is, therefore, we don't have to worry about metagame, right? We don't have to worry about guys now planning, backtracking, and trying to circumvent those mistakes, or trying to circumvent the game world, or trying to circumvent the assumption risks, right? Okay. So that's kind of the goal of Dark Age of Man. We're trying to get in such a space as equal players at the table that it's all legit to some degree within context. Okay. All right. So I thought it went great. It started a little off because I don't think we had decided exactly which player needed to start the session. Looking back now, I will never do that again. I will set the tempo in this because the players, it's unfair to them, right? They're They just don't know what's going too far and what's not going too far. So I won't ask players to do that again, right? So, but I thought it would be kind of fun to see where maybe Dale or Brian or Eric kind of sets the tone. Is it nighttime? Is it midnight? Are they at home? Are they at the tap? What are they doing? And who are they talking to? And then that would kind of spark the pace of the session in which the random seeds would start occurring. Okay. And so it worked, but I think we were all kind of, I don't think anybody really knew who should be starting. And poor Brian jumped in and took over, and he was just trying to make sure that everything that I had mentioned in the Dark Age of Facebook post was known to the people at the table and to the potential audience. And so that was fantastic. So he jumped in and did the GM job. Poor guy had to jump in and do my job, is what ends up happening, right? Okay. But it was great. It worked great. So again, because so much of our game is driven by player action, player declaration, if they aren't interacting, if they aren't acting, if they aren't declaring, if they aren't moving through space, moving through scene, communicating, we're going to have slowdowns. We're going to have periods of stalemate, right? And one of the things in our rules we talk about with the dice checks, they are pass-fail dice checks. There's going to be no such thing as a stalemate, right? You will pass and you will succeed at whatever at a certain level, or you will utterly fail, and failure should be a circumstance changer, or at least it would be something as simple as, well, you've just not achieved your goal. But usually there's going to be a weight to the die check, or why are we doing it? Okay. All right. So with that being said, there's no stalemates in our actual dice commands, right? Okay. So I don't want to recap the whole video. People may or may not care about these three characters going through the world. I do, of course, and that's why I'm running a campaign. They are all preparing for a big tourney. The Lord goes, Brian, Lord Elamir, goes up and talks to the Baron and signs up he and his brother and his man-at-arms as guards, for the tournament, which was fantastic. Dell's character is propositioned. This was a personal seed for Dell's character. He's propositioned by another lord from another land holding to turn a blind eye to contraband moving through the north of Lord Barons, and he refuses. The big random seed I rolled before the launch of the session was the Sea Peoples, the Vikings, invade from the River Dredge, which is the river literally, the Dredgewater sits right on the River Dredge. And so, and a personal seed for Eric was a Von Mort soldier demands his equipment be fixed, basically. And we had that moment very simple. He negotiated that. We got it fixed. We had one assumption, a risk in that game that I realized later was definitely did not intend to happen the way it happened. But here's a perfect example of assumption risk. We're negotiating to fix that sword. And he says, what do you think's a fair price? And Eric, I think not knowing the value of silver in the world, said, well, 10 silver. And of course, I, in character as Von Mort, laughed and said, you must be jesting. That's the king doesn't make that in a year, right? It was my way of kind of getting us in alignment with what, and then I think Eric realized, oh, okay, he was, and the sad part was, Eric, I think, asked before the negotiation, I really don't know, what the value is, and so I should have just given him more information. So in that sense, Eric was put in a bad spot, as he was left ignorant, so to speak, of the situation. I tried not to make that a bad thing. I just tried to have Von Mort laugh it off as you must be jesting. That the king doesn't make that, and it allowed us to stay in character and fix that, right? But the reality is, I should have just told him it's going to be copper negotiations here, right? That would have been very simple for Eric to say, right? Okay, but that's again, hindsight's 20/20. When we're live in game time, there's always these moments, right? Excuse me, Eric's second, and then I rolled again. So once they deal with the seed, I roll another seed. So Eric dealt with that, and it was done. He even made the check and fixed the sword. I rolled, his next seed was another nobleman. It demands his wagon, or wants his wagon fixed. Not demands, but it requests his wagon be fixed. So that was the second one that shows up on his professional chart. Now, on the professional chart, there are vague references to the profession. So I leave it vague, so it can be a blacksmith, or it could be a witch, or it could be a doctor, or it could be an architect, right? Okay, so Eric's crossing the field as all of these of people have come from all over the county and all over other counties for this tournament. And he's crossing the field, and that's when the big seed shows up. The Sea Peoples invade, and we have them. They crash, they raid, they kill, they maim, and we break into a war, basically warfare. All combat checks rolled are not necessarily personal, as it affects the entire combat. So as Dale was failing combat checks, he was suffering wounds that I didn't define out loud. They were more fatigue, bruising, maybe cuts, as he was scrambling to get a child away from the combat and running toward the palisade. So we didn't have to stop and talk about the wounds unless they became life-threatening. However, every time he failed a combat check, it wiped out another camp. I think he fell 2 or 3, and it took out Lord Eldweld. Then it took out the nobleman that Eric was going to fix the wagon. So those 2 were wiped out. Those 2 noblemen were killed and wiped out. So every time Dell fell, something fell, right? Okay. And then, of course, Eric's character engages with the chieftain. He's able to make a prestige roll and demand the chieftain. He basically war cries to the chieftain across the battlefield, "Come face me!" And he has to actually make a prestige check. If not, this guy would have sent his troops to kill Eric, and he would have gone onto the palisade to bring down the Baron, or try to bring down the palisade, right? Take a fort, which is what they want. But he wins the prestige check, and that allows him to have and again, his goal. I don't set this. So people say, well, that's GM fiat. No, because Eric said, I want to draw the chief into combat. He said it. He rolled, and then we asked the dice, prove it. The dice proved it. Eric gets what he wants, a 1-to-1 fight with the chief. I didn't GM fiat any of that. They do. Dale tells me, I'm grabbing the boy. I'm running toward the palisade. I'm ushering people. Well, he's still in combat, so he still has to make a combat roll, although he's not narrating that he's in a fight. He's narrating that he's fighting him off while he grabs this boy, and he's running and he's screaming, everybody into the palisade, everybody into the palisade. He still has to make a roll, right? Any action they declare requires a roll, especially in a conflict like combat or climbing a cliff or in a sea storm, okay? So the dice are there. When they narrate what's happening, the dice must prove it or change circumstances. Dell eloquently defined this the other night. The dice actually change circumstances. It's not so much just wounds, right? It's circumstances changes. Either it confirms the circumstances they've narrated, or it means I have to tweak the circumstances. And it's a brilliant way, and it was an eloquent way. Dell put it in beautiful terms there, and I'm gonna have to try to get that into the rule book. That's really what's happening. Circumstances are changing. Okay, so no GM fiat there, right? I introduced this raiding party. Their intent solely is to take over Dredgewater, take out the palisade. Very simple. That's GM fiat, right? Because in my thing it just says Sea People's raid. That's it. They obviously are motivated to take over the small little village and the barons, right? Okay. And it happened to fall upon this tournament. So of course all of the attendees of the tournament, I have to have some GM fiat. They're obviously trying to take down these things. Every failed combat check was failure of the combatants to fight off the raiders. Dell successfully gets to the palisade. Brian's character successfully gets to the wall and starts commanding troops, and they're firing arrows, and every time they successfully do damage, it takes that army down. I do have wounds for the army. Every wound was 10 men, I think, and I think I had 12 wounds for this army, so it was like 125 soldiers. So every wound would knock off 10 soldiers, right? That's a very simple way for me to handle this mob combat. And the other thing is, that means wounds from somebody on this side of the battlefield, wounds from the palisade, wounds with a sword fight between Brian and a knight. All of those wounds from all over the battlefield would change the scope of the war, right? Very, very simple mechanism. Our game is designed for exactly this reason. So it's about narrative, right? And they declare. Eric said, I want the chief. I say, you're going to have to make a war cry prestige check to convince the chief you're worthy. And he does it. and and he role plays it beautifully as well, right? I could have given a bonus just for the way he called it into play. They end up in a combat. Everybody witnesses it from the palisade while they're firing on the troops that are trying to get into the thing. They pull up the drawbridge. They shut the doors. They're picking off Vikings. And meanwhile, Eric destroys this chieftain, brings him to his knees. He basically says, "Give me a weapon before I die," and Eric denies him his path to Valhalla, kills him. Everybody witnesses, and Eric immediately scores a repute because he's achieved an amazing heroic feat, and it has to be witnessed. So in our game, you can only level up, and you can level up instantaneously by repute, and the repute can be something epic that people witness that will tell your tale in front of the whole world, out there alone on the battlefield among dead bodies and tents and destruction and burning and people crawling away, wounded, etc., etc. Eric strikes down their leader. That is a repute point. It's an instant repute point. Now, he can spend it immediately, or he can kind of wait and then narratively decide how that improves his character. And I did tell him in game I expect a narrative description of how you're now got more prestige, or how your body has improved, whatever. Eric was brilliant at talking about how he was improving his weapon as a blacksmith, and I would say, brilliant, make a roll. And I knew what he was doing. He was trying to bring his weapon status up, and he would narrate how he's doing that. And he didn't say, "I want to increase the value of my weapon." He said, I'm setting my weapon on the hearth, and I'm letting it the blood burn into the thing, and I'm wrapping the handle because I found it was slick, and it was as a non-combatant, I've discovered I need to improve my weapon, and it was masterful, right? As was everything Dale and Brian did. I had one qualm in the game. There was a fantastic, as we marched, the other personal one for the Lord, I forgot to mention this, was 9 strangers show up begging help. And it was meant to be begging help for the Baron, excuse me, because it was on his personal sheet for him, but he was at the Baron's facility signing up for the tournament, so it couldn't be at his own keep. I didn't know if Brian would start us in his keep or not, but I rolled that chart and it said 9 people show up at his door banging, "Please help us." Well, Brian was there, so I put him there begging the Baron's help, and the Baron declining them in an audience, and then asking Brian, "Would you negotiate with these people, find out what their problem is?" So it worked beautifully, and this is what I mean by saying all of the seeds come up. All of these things, and we have to organically find a way to put them in front of the player, and it makes narrative sense. It was Brian's seed. If he had been in his own keep, at his own lands, they would have come banging in the middle of the night demanding, "Please help us, please help us." And Brian would have he would have had this conflict to resolve, right? Well, I just put the conflict in different contexts. They were there to see the Baron and had ignored his keep. And we had this great conversation along the way in which he finds out, "Why didn't, did you come this way?" And they say, "Well, yeah, we actually passed your keep, but we thought you were too lowbrow. You weren't powerful enough to help us." Okay, so anyway, all this stuff happens. They negotiate with these people in a campfire, and they find out who they are, and they all agree, "You know what, let's go help these people because it sounds like a mine." And again, Brian points to this. It sounds like a mine. Our resources for tin and for galeno, lead, are cut off. We have to do this, even if it's not to save this village and to save these people. We have to try to recover that mine. And they go on to another town, and they deal with a king who has made a pact with this creature, and the mine has been shut down and cut off from production because of this deal. The king has found a way to at least appease and this creature, but unfortunately has relegated the future of his kingdom and all his people to poverty and to misery. And they figured this out, and they're trying to deal with this creature now, and that's where the session ends. There was one moment in the game where I was a little disappointed in, probably in, or I misunderstood the effort, right? So there was a great moment where Lord Elamir says to the guys in the bar, "Listen, I must go talk to the monk. I've got to get more information because the king is not going to play. The king is not going to give me right." But he found out that the king was certainly lying and in denial. So he achieved everything he needed to achieve with the king. So Brian, a great role play. And then Brian says, "I got to go now to the church and talk to these monks. The king has directed me there for some odd reason." Okay, and I think it's a good idea because I need more information about this creature, this beast. Is it real? What is it? Etc. Etc. But could you guys try to loosen the lips of the locals and get some kind of information? Get more. So Brian goes and he busts his hump doing this. And meanwhile, Eric has a great role play in the bar, but Eric shuts off all conversation with the barkeep, which is his prerogative. He's drinking, he's telling stories, he's not interested. Dell is out in the stables with the horses, and has segregated himself away from any context. So I put in front of him a small boy who's a groom. He's in there, feeding and cleaning up after the horses, and he is fascinated with Dell's characters. He's got these teeth hanging around his neck, and he's got this bone knife, and Dell's an antisocial. He's made it very clear he's an antisocial character, right? Of course. So all of that works, and it's brilliant, but not much came from the conversation. Dell did manage to get from the boy that he knows the creature and he knows the lair of the creature, and therefore so here's what happens in our game. If there is no movement forward, if there's no pathway via conversation, movement, etc., then things can stalemate, and we end up circling the toilet bowl before everything goes down the toilet, right? And it works out, and it worked out great. But those two moments were a bit I won't say complicated, because they were not complicated. They could have ultimately stalemated much of another pathway forward, right? For another seed to be introduced. However, they're dealing with this major seed right now, where they're dealing with a personal seed from the Lord, basically. So anyway, I have rolled 2 other major event random seeds, but they have not yet shown themselves. They can show up anytime organically in play. So it was fantastic. I had a wonderful time. I think we're all kind of getting our feet under us as to how far can they go, how is this going to work. I don't know how comfortable people are when they sit down at your table to play your game, a game you've designed, and I don't want anybody to ever be frustrated by that or intimidated by that, and I want them to be free to ask questions. But it was a great session, and I couldn't have asked for more, to be honest. It was perfect. Ironically, I wanted to play for another hour. So anyway, because it was getting juicy. It was getting juicy. Fantastic. So quickly, before I go to work here, shower and work, I wanted to then talk quickly about the segue into answering, in a way, the VR of Robert the Narraiders. I believe developers and systems implement the style they intend. And so he talks about rewarding players, that he wants it to be a party-based thing. Well, it is. But I think the game tell you that. Hollow Earth tells you, reward this. 2D20 tells you, reward these things. There are games that do, by rule, tell you reward for players doing these things, but there is a criteria they have to meet to do it. It's not an arbitrary, dude, I like you, here's a penny. They have to do something within the mechanics of the rules that actually justify the reward. And I think Robert did that brilliantly in our 3 sessions. I think his system defines it, so I don't think he did anything in conflict with style, because his book defines how they can score these things. And I think every example Robert gives was supported by the rules of the game. He talks about my idea. I had to execute the idea. I did not expect in any way, shape, or form a reward for having a good idea. I expect to be rewarded for something that transpires that the rules actually say I should be rewarded for. The rules do not say you should get rewarded for doing a thing, but taking an action. Okay, just because my action was instead of sneaking or instead of killing them, I wanted to create a diversion to make it easier to sneak. So I did get rewarded because I made it easier for us to sneak. So for a player, the success of my actions and that impacting our ability to sneak into the caverns, to climb up the mountain and not be seen, that was reward enough, right? Because that's what we're playing for. We're playing to utilize the system. We're playing to say, okay, God help me, here I go, I'm going to roll the dice. Yes, I did it. And if he then said, they see you, that's a problem, right? That would have been a mechanism and a style problem. Number one, style kind of fucked up and missed the point of the thing. And it would have been a problem if he then punished us or ignored what the rules said about achieving stealth success. If I roll and succeed in sneaking, and then the GM says you're caught, we're all scratching our head going, but I succeeded at the thief check. Explain that to me. He never did that. Robert played his game masterfully, and he should have, because he's experienced. It's his game, and I don't think he did anything questionable. David did have a great idea, but you still have to mechanically achieve it. In our game, you can say, I want the Viking on the battlefield. And I say, but mechanically, you don't just get it. You got to make the roll. You got to convince him to come to you. Prestige. He made the roll. He gets what he wants. In Robert's game, David has a great idea. The guy is going to defend himself, and there's a mechanic in which he defends himself. Right? I described in my game of peace how I used battle scars to deny giving information because it's within the rules, and the guys knew it. I explained to him, I'm going to spin battle scars here. You can keep trying to get information, and I'm going to keep spinning a battle scar to bring his composure back up. And it's because it's in the rules, and it's part of the game. And because I'm a player as a GM, I get to do that. I get to say, really? And he'll knock his composure down, and I'll say, I'm going to spin a battle scar on my turn and bring his composure back up. And then he would argue, and I would bring the battle scar. I would bring his composure back up with the battle scar. That's the whole point of the prophecy meter. That's the point of the battle scars, is I get to make it hell for them legally, right? And they have fun because they're in a game. They're in a contest trying to win in that one moment. Okay. I don't have any issues with Robert's style, nor his game. Love his game. And, of course, David and Dell in that game were fantastic. So I just wanted to remark on that. I believe, first and foremost, the system tells us whether we should be rewarding players or not. And if it offends you to be rewarded with inspiration at a 5th edition table by the GM, but it was within the bounds of the rules, then you need to get over yourself as a player. You need to get over not being rewarded. And if you aren't rewarded and it's a miscommunication or you feel there's an issue, then you can certainly talk to the GM about, I don't expect to be rewarded now, but in the rules, I kind of thought there might be a Benny coming to me for that, right? Now again, when it is subjective, it's always going to be a potential argument when it's not straight defined. For instance, his fate die is defined. If I roll a 6, I get to blow up and keep rolling to get my score as high as possible. That's defined. If he also defined, if you activate the fate die, you get a battle scar, then there's a rule he can't deny it, right? Like his fate die rule. He also says if you go to 0, you automatically get a battle scar and hit points. So the player shouldn't have to wait for him to say you earn a battle scar, you went to 0. The minute I go to 0 or negative, I should write a battle scar on my sheet, right? Because the rules tell me I can, right? So a couple of things I think are paramount in gaming. Whether you play with an old group in a cultural play or you play with a brand new group of people, if you're not playing a game you've all played before and you all know the rules too, you need to get your shit together and you need to read the rules. You need to know the rules the best you can. It's understandable that we all have real life, we all have jobs, we all have families, we all have things we have to do, and we know that you can read the rules and just not get back to them. And so nobody expects you to memorize the rules, but have read the rules, have made some effort to, or have a cheat sheet of the things you think are going to be a thing you need to know or come up in session. But here's the thing, never be afraid to say to the GM, out of character, how does the Benny thing work here? I mean, there were times in the game, because I'm also looking at as our actual play videos of peace with Robert, as opportunities to teach Robert's game. So there were times in session I literally stopped and said, Robert, is this a place where we could use group tactics to achieve this? And Robert very clearly said, and by the way, the book says this too, and I knew that, but it was an opportunity for me to ask the developer live in game, could you answer this for us? It was a way to teach the game. And I literally said, can we come together to aid him via this group part of the rule book? And he said, point blank, that's only for attributes, which I knew, and it says in the rules. And this was a combat. This was an actual influence check by Dale, I believe. And so answered it. It was right. It was legit, but it allowed an opportunity for me to kind of stop play and talk about the mechanics right there, right? For anybody who might be learning the game and using our videos to learn his game, and not to mention, I might be mistaken by what I'm reading, right? So anyway, fantastic. I love that video conversation, by the way, Robert, outstanding. And again, I'm sorry this went so long, but it is what it is. I wanted to talk about the difference between both our games. Here's the difference. Style, our game, it's really about player agency and the style, and players can literally, in a way, define what they want to do. They don't negotiate a plan and then hope to God, cross their fingers the GM doesn't screw them, etc. No. Eric says, I want the chief. And I say, there's a mechanic to get him. Roll prestige, and he does it, and he gets what he wants. He gets a face-off with the chief. Eric defined it. it was fantastic. If he failed, I would have sent troops, and Eric would have he would have been surrounded by an army of angry Vikings, and he would have been in the same type of combat. But he would have been with a pool, and every failed check would have wounded him, or would have then wounded the army as it was all over the battlefield, or the chief when he was in the one-on-one conversation. So here's the thing: Eric brought that Viking down, right? And he brought him down to the final. They brought as an entire culture. As an entire group, they brought that Viking down, that army down, right? All of them hammering away to some degree. The question would be, if they all felt they needed to be reported with repute, we can have that conversation. Everybody witnessed him by calling out the leader and striking down the leader, and he striking the final blow against the army, so to speak. There were still about 15 warriors there. But again, at that point, they were one wound. Those 15 or 18 represented in the mob one wound. Okay, so they could have pursued them and killed them in the tree. So I guess there could have been an argument by the whole party. Why didn't we all get a repute but they didn't know. I don't think they knew that they were all bringing the mob down, so to speak. Maybe they did. And that would be a fair conversation, and I'd be more than willing to say, make your argument as to whether everybody at the Barons' Keep, did they all earn repute? I could argue that yes, of course they did, because the Lord took command on the battlements, and Dell's character brought the boy in. Did they all probably earn repute for being heroes at this Viking raid? Yes, and I probably should just have given them all repute. In the heat of the moment, when Eric strikes down their chieftain and ends this, that is instantly seen as that undeniable. That's what everybody sees, is this giant 6'4" blacksmith, local town blacksmith, striking down the chieftain of these Vikings. That is an instant repute, no question. Could I have also given repute to the other two? I probably could have, and maybe I should have, and we'll have that conversation. Do you guys think you've earned a repute for repelling the Viking raid? And it would be a fair and honest conversation, and it could well happen. And in that sense, I can see why some players would feel denied, right, their reward for the thing. So anyway, both sessions, all three sessions with Robert and David and Dell, fantastic with Peace. My local session in Peace with Brian and Josh was unbelievable. And Dark Age of Man, it's a matter of getting the darn book finished. It's a matter of finishing the writing, cleaning it up, getting the art in the book, and then trying to publish this for everybody to get from our game what they will. And I'm planning on, this is a test play campaign. We're going to do hopefully 6 to 10 sessions over the course of 6 months or so, maybe. But I anticipate I will be playing Dark Age of Man a lot in my future, or versions of it, whether it's science fiction version or a Wild West version, etc., etc. But bottom line is, thank you for listening to this, and again, good day. Bye bye.